Good afternoon, everyone. It is the top of the hour, so let us go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us today. It is really exciting to be able to share with you our second mid-year in review report for state policies impacting CTE, a partnership between Advanced CTE and the Association for Career and Technical Education, or ACTE. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dan Hinderleiter. I am the Associate Director for State Policy here at Advanced CTE. And joining me today, we have Catherine Imperator, the Research and Content Director for ACTE, and Belly Sando, our Policy Associate at Advanced CTE. And together, the three of us make up the team who regularly do this state policy tracking. Today, as part of today's webinar, we'll be looking through and advancing quite a bit of the content that has already been passed to date, and we'll be sharing some of the information that is important to you all, both state and local leaders in CTE programs across the country. We are also going to have a brief Q&A. So if you would like to use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to send us any questions that you might have throughout the course of the presentation, you are free to do so. You can also use the chat, as some of you are right now, to share who you are and where you're calling in from today. So glad to see some folks calling in from Nevada, Kansas, Colorado, Arizona. Great to be here. Glad you're all here with us today. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our research associate, Belly Sando, who's going to take us through some of the context setting, or is it Catherine first? I'm not sure. So we'll turn it to Belly, and we'll see what to do from there.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. And thank you all so much for joining us today. We are very excited to share with you some updates about state policies that have been enacted thus far in the year 2024. So just a little bit of context. This is the second mid-year joint webinar between ACTE and Advanced CTE. And ultimately, the year-end review report is released every year in February. And so we're getting ready to prepare that as well. And Dan will take some time throughout this presentation as well to share with you the updated sortable state policy tracker, which is available via Power BI. And ultimately, the tracking takes place throughout the year, and we track CTE-related policies, and our policies are validated by our state CTE directors before being shared out and released in the year-in review report. Now, a little bit more context within the local space, why this is important. And so these state policies help our state CTE leaders, you all, directors, and anyone implicated in this work to ultimately better understand national and state trends. Also giving you all the ability to advocate for quality policies in your state, and more so within the local context, a review of precedent policies that have been enacted as a model to scale for specific local context. So with that being said, some of the top level findings that we're seeing so far in the year 2024, we're super excited because as of July 2024, we're seeing 31 states having enacted or passed a combined 121 policies. We have Washington right at the top, having passed the most CTE-related policies so far with 14. And we do have quite a few legislators that are still in session, 13 states, and we have 3 territories, that are still in session, and 2 states that are in special session. And we also are seeing a number of systems that are affected with the policies that are being enacted. At the top, we have the secondary system with 62 policies. We have a post-secondary system with 50 policies so far. And we also have 43 policies for the workforce system. Now, a slight caveat is that a lot of the policies that we're seeing enacted, as you may already be aware, are not simply impacted one system, but a variety of the systems at once. So a lot of these numbers also reflect that as well. Now, On to top categories. Super, super exciting. We compared the top categories so far in the year 2024 to the top categories that we saw at the end of the year 2023 in the February year in review report. And so far we're seeing that funding is making its way to the top. Right now we have funding at number 1 with 54 policies being enacted thus far that fall under this category. Second, we have industry partnerships / work-based learning with 30 policies. And then we have access and equity at 28 policies. And then we have data reporting and or accountability with 26 policies. And then we have industry recognized credentials with 19 policies. So we're very, very excited because we're seeing that access and equity is making its way back to top 5. And that's a great indication that states are being intentional about increasing access to CTE and making the CTE programs being more equitable for all learners. Now we're going to spend a little bit of time just going over some examples of policies that have been enacted in each of the 5 categories. Starting with funding at the top, we have funding. We have 22 states that have enacted 54 policies so far within the category of funding. One of the examples is with Colorado, HB 1186, where 75 million was appropriated to the Division of Occupational Education. And of this 75 million includes 30 million for state assistance to CTE. And there's also a $20 million appropriation to area technical colleges. Now, compared to last year's appropriations, we're seeing an overall $5 million increase in appropriations to the Division of Occupational Education. And along that, we also saw a $2 million increase for state assistance to CTE. So last year was about at 28 million, and also a $2 million increase in the area technical colleges as well. Moving on to Idaho with House Bill 763. $20 million was transferred to the Career Ready Students Program Fund. And ultimately, this is to incentivize Idaho middle and high schools to create CTE programs that prepare learners to meet local and regional industry and workforce demands. Now, we all are very familiar with the aspect of funding and where to find funds to promote CTE. And so an interesting thing to note with this law is that the majority of the funds transferred in HB 763 are coming from Idaho's American Rescue Plan Fund. Now moving on to Wisconsin with SB 702, where district boards are able to apply and request for up to $20 million for assistance technical colleges, ultimately to expand an existing oral healthcare program or to create a new oral healthcare program in the district, so long as they're able to prove that there's a need in that area. And these funds are available for the 2023 to 2025 fiscal biennium. All right, that's it for funding. And now we're going to go to industry partnerships / work-based learning. We have 18 states that have enacted 30 policies thus far that fall in this category. Now, some of the examples include Florida SB 7016, where the Training, Education, and Clinicals in Health funding program was created. And so something that is very interesting about this is 2 main pivotal points where there's provided a high quality educational experience for healthcare learners, while also offsetting the cost of training such learners for the healthcare facility. So we're seeing that there's the partnership between industry, the healthcare industry, and the institution to offer high quality work-based learning opportunities for aspiring healthcare practitioners, while also mitigating the cost for the healthcare facility. Now, moving on to Georgia with SB 497, their apprenticeship program was amended. They underwent a name change, so now it's called the High Demand Apprenticeship Program. And ultimately, there's an increase in the number of apprentices that each employer may sponsor, going from 5 to 10. And so Georgia is really looking to incentivize employers to either create apprenticeship programs or expand their current apprenticeship programs. And under this law, the employer sponsor enters a contract with the board, and upon successful completion of each apprentice's apprenticeship, then the employer sponsor receives a financial reward for each apprentice up to 10. Now, moving on to Utah with SB 122, where the Youth Apprenticeship Governance Study was created, ultimately to find ways to expand student and employer participation in youth apprenticeship and to demonstrate how secondary and post-secondary programs can align with youth apprenticeship opportunities. We're seeing that ultimately the purpose of this law is to design a framework and a system to maximize the efficiency of youth apprenticeship programs in Utah, while also expanding such opportunities for learners. All right, moving on to access and equity. And under this category, we have 15 states that have enacted 28 policies thus far. Some of the examples include Nebraska with LB 851, where learners are allowed to telecommute to their internship program if the internship and the institution are both located in Nebraska. Now, we see that this is actually an amendment where previously there was a requirement that the business and the institution must be at least 30 miles apart. But with this amendment, the requirements has been lifted. Now, moving on to Oregon with SB 1532, where a funding mechanism was provided for educational institutions and community-based organizations to implement a statewide plan to help and support learners from underserved backgrounds. Now, some of those learners include asylum seekers, immigrant learners, and also learners who have experienced disproportionate results in education due to historical practices as defined and identified by the State Board of Education by rule. And last but not least, in this category, we have the state of Washington with HB 2019, where the Native American Apprentice Assistance Program was established. And this program ultimately was established to address challenges faced by Native American communities in pursuing a post-secondary education. Now, the office in charge of administering this program is required to publicize the program to the Native American community in Washington, and also is required to consult Native American tribes and state-registered apprenticeship programs to adopt guidelines and rules that may facilitate Native American communities' ability to apply for the program. All right, next up, we have data reporting and or accountability. Now, under this category, we have 14 states that have enacted 26 policies thus far. Some of the examples include South Dakota with HB 1058, where the number of participants who completed a degree or a training program at the public technical college and the number of those who successfully passed licensure or certification examinations must be recorded. Now, this is an amendment to the previous reporting mechanisms that South Dakota had. Moving on to Ohio with SB 104, and this is an amendment to the College Credit Plus program, where each district is required to include on their school report whether they informed learners about the program, the College Credit Plus program or not. And they're simply required to do so by checking a yes or a no in their school report. And lastly, under this category, we have Georgia with HB 982, where the State Workforce Development Board is required to create a high demand career list and also audit this list for its effectiveness, on student outcomes. And the board ultimately is in charge of implementing a data-driven process to assess current and future growing and declining industries, occupations, skills, and credentials. Now, the last of our top 5, but certainly not least, we have industry recognized credentials, where 12 states so far have enacted about 19 policies. And some of the examples include Kentucky with House Bill 444, where the number of hours of a work experience is required to receive an electrician license may be partially substituted by an industry recognized credential in electrical technology or a related field. Now, some of the industry recognized credentials that Kentucky allows would include a training course, an associate's degree or a diploma in electrical technology or a related field, or even 2+ years of teaching electrical technology or a related field. Now, moving on to Nebraska with LB 16, where occupational boards are required to issue occupational licenses or government certifications based on post-secondary education or work experiences in another state or in the military. So if someone moves to the state of Nebraska and has a post-secondary education or work experience from another state, then the occupational board is required to issue a license or certification to practice in that specific field in the state of Nebraska. And last but certainly not least, we have West Virginia with HB 4814, where the State Advisory Council on Post-Secondary Attainment Goals was created. And this was created to ensure that students are provided opportunities to learn and earn the most relevant industry recognized credentials and skills. And ultimately, the council is meant to serve as an intermediary where they are facilitating collaboration between the industry and the institution to bring forth the most relevant industry recognized credentials. Now, those are some of the examples of the policies that we're seeing enacted by states in the top 5 categories. Now I'm going to pass it on to Catherine to share some trends that we've noticed thus far with the state policies being enacted. Catherine?
Thanks, Veli. Okay, so just wanted to, I'm very happy to be here with you. Always happy to work on this project. We've been doing it for more than a decade, and it's always been really interesting to see the trends and themes come and go over time. So Veli has gone over some of the trends that we've been seeing in 2024, but kind of thinking ahead a little bit in the future. I don't think these predictions will come as a surprise to anyone, but we do expect that there will be a continued focus on work-based learning and particularly apprenticeships. There are recent federal investments, almost $250 million recently invested on the federal level for the Apprenticeship Building America initiative. That includes almost $50 million going to about 9 states for expanding apprenticeships on the state level. Plus, of course, the state action that we've seen on apprenticeships, which Veli touched on, and which you will see more examples of in the report that will be coming out early next year for the 2024 state CTE policies. So that's just something that seems to be a really big topic of interest to policymakers, and we expect to see more action on that topic, including teacher apprenticeships, which has been a policy topic both on the federal and state level, teacher apprenticeships and related initiatives to grow the teacher workforce across subject areas. Some of those structured more inclusively to include CTE professionals and how professionals tend to move into the CTE workforce, as well as some other models. We also think that we will continue to see an interest in delivering on prior investments in clean energy and the green economy through strengthening that workforce, so that all the money that has already been sort of spent or appropriated or earmarked for things like expanding electric vehicle networks and green construction and semiconductor manufacturing can actually happen, because we are developing the workforce to make that happen. And last but not least, artificial intelligence is a really big topic right now, and I expect to see state legislatures start to grapple with that impact in schools and workplaces. So that will be an interesting, I think, area for us to be looking forward to in the future. Thanks, Valerie. So feel free to contact us with any questions that you have. And I think I will turn it back over.
Yes, thank you, Catherine. So before we have Dan go over the Power BI tracker, we wanted to open the floor for any questions, comments on either the policies or anything that we have shared thus far. I'm going to open the chat now.
And if people have questions, you can just put them right in the Q&A. Because of our security settings, we won't allow anyone to come off mute for the conversation today.
Yes, so feel free to go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, so I did see a question in the chat earlier. I just wanted to make sure that everyone saw some of those responses. The slides will be available after today's presentation and will be sent out to everyone. So each of the policies that Veli mentioned, as well as a link to our state policy tracker, will be shared directly through that report, or through those slides, excuse me. And then the recording will also be available on our websites. We do have we have nothing listed for California this year, but we have quite a few policies from California from the previous years. That being said, if you do have any specific policies that you think would be recommended for us, we would love to see that. Here is an interesting question related to the teacher pipeline. Have we seen any actions lately around flexibility in CTE teacher credentialing? Catherine, have you heard anything or seen anything kind of from your lens about teacher credentialing or the flexibility specifically for local educators?
Yeah, looking in the 2024 tracker that we have, I'm not seeing anything come up right now. That may have been, I may be thinking a little bit more back in 2023, but definitely hearing a lot of conversation around that topic, around opening up maybe to some more kind of part-time models, as well as opening up to different levels of experience, different combinations of education credentials, and workplace experience to sort of ease that transition. So definitely expect to see more of that.
And Veli, I know you've been doing some work around intermediaries, work-based learning. And I know that work-based learning is a tag for one of our areas that we regularly track policy. Can you share a little bit more, maybe things that you might have heard around intermediaries or just the role of intermediaries more broadly?
Yes, so states and folks are really looking to understand the role of intermediaries in gathering institutions, industries, and just facilitating collaboration overall. And that's also a service that we are also looking to expand here, even at Advanced CTE. And so we're really looking to do research to understand how nonprofits or organizations are looking to play that role, because we understand that not every organization is necessarily an intermediary, but there are certain things that they can do to support and facilitate the collaboration. So that's something that we're definitely looking into, and we're seeing states venturing out and either reaching out and soliciting support, whether it's to us or to other organizations, to see how to do that to the best and effectively.
Great. And I know that one specific state that has done some financial investment in intermediaries, Colorado, through some of their investments this year, instituted a $2 million grant program supporting organizations, specifically connecting apprenticeship programs and the participants that would engage in those and looking through those intermediaries specifically. This is a question. This seems a little bit more technical of a question, so we may have to follow up with you on this question about secondary students with disabilities in inclusive CTE programs not located on high school campuses. Because that is a little niche, we would have to kind of do a little bit more digging on that specific question. So I don't think that we can answer that one live today. But if you want to email us, and Veli, we can put those emails back up. If you want to email any of us, we would be happy to kind of look through our policies and see if there's anything specific that we can incorporate for you. How can I get involved in providing professional development opportunities on integrating AI for CTE teachers or ACTE members? Catherine, do you have any professional development opportunities or do any outreach for specific professional development like that?
I mean, that's something that we're going to have a lot of sessions about that at our upcoming Career Tech Vision conference in San Antonio. That was a big topic as people were submitting their sessions this year. So we absolutely do. I feel free. I'll drop my email's right there. So just feel free to send me an email. And I did want to go back.
I know the AI session at Vision last year was one of the most jam-packed sessions that I had. I walked past the room and I couldn't even get in. So I'm sure that that'll be similar this year.
It's a really big topic because in CTE, we get to think about it both in using it in education spaces, but also preparing students to use AI in the workforce. So we're really thinking about it from multiple angles. I also wanted to go back and back to that teacher pipeline question, because I was going through the tracker, I had my filtering options wrong. So actually there have been a number of several policies related to CTE teacher credentialing, and like, for instance, in Hawaii, authorizing boards to consider candidates with high school diplomas and comparable education and training to be qualified for a CTE teaching license. Authorizing in, that's New Jersey, authorizing alternate routes to expedite teacher certification of people who are already employed in school districts and other positions. So that is something that we are seeing, and that we'll have some more examples of in the full report. Thanks.
Great. And it looks like Michigan shared with us a link that we'll be sure to add to our resources as well, about the educator preparation pipeline pathway specifically for youth development. So we'll be sure to share that link out as well. That's a great resource. Thanks to Jillian for sharing that to us. And then we received a question also about work-based learning for graduation requirements. I know that there have been a couple of states who are looking at work-based learning for graduation requirements. Indiana, for example, is working on a high school redesign and a diploma redesign, looking at some of the designations, including completion of a quality work-based learning experience that's aligned to a student's post-secondary goals. And so there are some examples, not only from this year, but in previous years as well. And then there's also quite a bit of movement around work-based learning for the collection of data. And I can't go through every single one, but there are quite a few who are looking at the student record, particularly through an individualized career and academic plan, or an ICAP, or something similar to that at the state level that every student is required to do throughout the state. And then the work-based learning experience is linked to that ICAP. Veli, if you want to stop screen sharing, I would be happy to go through the state policy tracker and demonstrate how our audience today can do some of this research on their own. So if you go to Advanced CTE's state policy resources section, and I just dropped the link in the chat, you can actually see we have the link to our entire series for all of the previous year in review reports that you can go through and read more prominently. And we will actually turn at the end of this year, this resource, this webinar, this state tracking that we've been doing throughout the course of 2024 into a 2024 year in review report. And we'll do another webinar like this, aggregating all of that information together in February of 2025. But if you scroll down a little bit further, you can see our state policy tracker. If you click access the tracker, it'll pull up a page, a separate page, and you can filter through all of the different policies that we've collected all the way back since 2013. And you can sort it by year, you can sort it by state. So if you, for example, want to see, someone was asking about California. So if you want to see all of California's policies, you can filter specifically by state. If you want to see the policies that we've tracked this year, you can just click on 2024 and it will show you all of the 2024 sections as well. And then you can also filter by the tag area, whether it's the system tag. So you can see secondary, post-secondary, middle school, workforce, and adult. And as Veli shared, some of those tags do connect to both the multiple system levels. So for example, if a policy is connected to, say, dual or concurrent enrollment, we would tag that as both secondary or post-secondary. And then you can see the content tags as well. So people were asking about CTE teacher certification and development. Other people were asking about industry partnerships and work-based learning. So you can use this policy tracker to not only see policies in your state, but you can see policies in other states or by tags as well. Catherine, because this is a state policy tracker, how could a local potentially use this to either advocate for something in their own state or to kind of share some of these policies out to push for some models that might be replicable in their state?
Sure. Yeah. So if there's policy conversation going on in your particular state, obviously you can advocate for or against as these processes are unfolding. You can also start to think about how legislation that has been enacted will impact you on the local level and what processes you can start to get into place. When you're looking at policies from other states, that's a great opportunity to see what could be applicable, what you think could be beneficial in your state, what you could propose in your state. You can also follow along. Because we do this every year, you can see how a policy gets enacted, and then often another year or two later, there's related regulation that is enacted. There might be tweaks to flow a little bit more smoothly so that you can see that. And of course, you can use these examples from other states when you're taking something to your state reps, as well as, of course, those important succinct data points from your own CTE student performance, your student success stories, your workforce employer success stories, and really kind of wrapping that into a package to promote CTE and the policies that you think would be beneficial.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. And as you were chatting, I did see an additional question come in about this being a live tracker. What's nice about us hosting this on Power BI versus other tracking tools that we've used before, or just sharing it out in our final year in review report, is that the tracker is live. So as we're seeing new policies come through, as we're validating those policies and kind of summarizing them, tagging them, it does take a couple of weeks for us to look at those policies, summarize them, add them to the tracker based on the different spaces. But as we're going through, we do try to update this at least on a monthly basis. So if you continue to look back at this tracker on a regular basis, you should be able to see those different pieces come back. I see us slowing down a little bit in our questions, but if anyone does have additional questions, do feel free to share those back to us. But Vali, if you want to go back to some of our final slides, then I'll close this out here. Great. So a couple of more resources for you. And again, these slides will be shared out with these live links. So feel free to click on these. We did release a set of webinars and some briefs around maximizing access and success for special populations in CTE. There was a webinar just last week about this very topic. So if you click on those links, if you go to our website and you'll be able to see those different spaces, feel free to click on those. Advanced CTE is also part of the New Skills Ready Network across 6 different local regions across the country. And we just published an annual report about the progress made across those sites. And then ACTE recently published a resource about staffing shortages in the CTE teacher pipeline. So make sure you check those out as well. We also have a bunch of upcoming events that you can check out or register for. Advanced CTE's fall meeting is in October 21st through 23rd, and that registration is open now on our website, careertech.org. ACTE also has registration open for an October conferences about best practices in CTE from October 9th to 11th. And then, of course, ACTE's big annual event, Career Tech Vision, is in December in San Antonio. Again, that registration is open. That is pretty much all for us today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We will be happy to answer any of those specific questions that you might have about anything connected to state CTE policy. A big shout out to ACTE for their partnership on this project and on this process. And we look forward to sharing more information for you all next time in February when we're able to share our final year in review report, aggregating all of the policies across 2024. Thank you all for joining us today. We hope to see you next time.